We just recorded a great episode with Cody Berman, and I think you guys are going to walk away from this one with some actionable tips of how to get your ass out of the couch and make some passive income, side hustles, and build up some income so you can invest and compound your wealth. This episode was a wealth of knowledge. Patrick, what do you think, man, after listening to Cody talk?
Dude, it was freaking awesome. Digital products, amazing. You have to listen all the way till the end because he snuck the biggest nugget out of the whole podcast, like the last 30 seconds of the show. So give it a listen, drop a comment, let us know. And here it is. How's it going, everybody? And welcome back to the Real FI Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick McGrath, with my co-host, James Ripion. How's it going today, James?
Going well, Patrick. Thanks for the intro. I appreciate it. I'm excited about today's podcast. I think we're going to have some unique perspectives offered today. We're going to be talking about some stuff that we really haven't talked about before in depth. We've glossed over it before, but I think we're going to have a really good conversation today. So our guest today is Cody Berman. Cody, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. Well, thank you guys for having me. Excited for this one. Name is Cody Berman. I discovered financial independence at the ripe old age of 19 and had a huge leg up because I didn't have student loans, didn't have debt at that time, kind of just went on a financial independence warpath, ended up hitting FI right before my 25th birthday. So I usually say 25, but it was actually like 24 through a combination of digital products, real estate, and just basically piling every single dollar that I possibly could into the stock market. And during the years running up to that, it was just like absolutely insane. Like 2018, 2019, the returns were like 30% in the stock market. So it was a pretty quick path to financial independence, and we can just kind of dive into whichever parts you guys want to talk about. I could talk about side hustles, frugality, how investing early compounds faster. I'm here for all of it.
So before we get into your, the details of how you got there, let's back up the clock a little bit and take you to when you were 19. What did at that point financial independence mean to you, and what did it look like? Did you have a number in mind for what you needed? How did you come up with that number? Talk about that big picture before we get into the details.
So two things happened when I was 19. So the first thing, actually unfinancial independence related or somewhat, my mom gave me the 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferris. And up to that point, I had always traded my time for money. I was, bussing tables. I was a waiter. I worked in retail. I was doing all these things where, I made $10 per hour. If I worked 5 hours, I made $50. So let's just leave taxes out of this. So that makes sense. But up until that point, like every single person in my life traded their hours for dollars. So that was kind of the only framework I knew when it came to money. But Tim Ferris just completely flipped that on its head. He talked about what he called muses, now more commonly known as side hustles. And he talked about this notion that you could front load the work, the time, the energy, the money to get something going, whether that's a business or real estate or digital products or whatever. And then you could kind of reap the benefit of that investment later on in perpetuity. So that was kind of the first catalyst. And the second one later that year, my mom introduced me to Mr. Money Mustache, and I read the shockingly simple math to early retirement, and that just blew my mind. I remember just looking at those numbers. I was like, are these real? Why are adults still working when they're 40 or 50 if these numbers are actually real? You can just save 50% of your income and retire in 17 years. That doesn't seem feasible. And so I was honestly pretty skeptical at first, but I just kept consuming. I kept reading books and listening to podcasts and watching YouTube and reading blogs, and eventually going to events, and I met all these people who had actually done it. So I think the first event I went to, I was 21, and that's when I was all in. So discovery at 19, consuming and still somewhat skeptical over the next 2 years. But then I went to an event at 21, and there was all these people who had achieved FI, and some in their 20s, some in their 30s, some in their 40s, 50s. And I was like, okay, these are real people. They're normal. I'm having a conversation with them. Let's do this thing. And so I just buckled up over the next couple of years and made it happen.
I really appreciate that you mentioned Mr. Money Mustache, because when I first got started in my financial independence journey, he was one of the first people I came across, and he lives a very unique life in how he chooses to be frugal, but also at the same time, very intentional. When you read about him and read about his experiences, you can quickly tell that he's not missing out on life, and he does things in such a way to obviously, have a lesser financial impact in a negative way on the future, but also live a great life. He's doing all these things that are super exciting to him. And now, of course, he's you wouldn't he's got a lot of money. He's done well for himself. He's got the blog and then everything else, real estate, all this, that, and the other. But I appreciate that you mentioned him. And I just wanted to stress that for some of our listeners, go check out his blog. He's got so much great content on there for those who are just kind of getting started in this journey. It's never too late to start, but, you can end up at a great place just by growing some of those foundational principles.
Yeah. And I really like all that too. Like, I think a lot of the times people think there's a way to just like jump ahead, like, but you do have to, it's kind of like that crawl, walk, run type of thing, which you're talking about. Like you see an Instagram post or something like that, and then you buy a book or start watching a bunch of YouTube videos and start putting something into practice, and all of a sudden you save up a little bit of money, and then you're like, oh, I'm going to go to a conference. My first one was like the 10x Growth Con with Grant Cardone. Did that like 5 years ago, and like you said, all of a sudden you're around a bunch of people thinking the same way, and then you're like, wow, okay, this can really happen. So you went to the conference, you decided to go all in. Now break down for us kind of those steps on where you kind of started with everything.
So at that point, I was 21. I was just going into my senior year of college, and I was going the finance and economics route. So I was like looking at investment banking jobs in New York because that's what all my friends were doing, and you make a ton of money, quite honestly. But I really wanted to kind of make this whole financial independence thing work, and I was like really into entrepreneurship. So on the side, I was doing like a bunch of side hustles in college and right after college. I had a podcast, I had a blog, I was doing freelance writing, I was doing freelance podcast editing, video editing, writing white papers, I was managing people's affiliate marketing systems, doing email marketing, all this random stuff basically to make ends meet with my side hustles. Because what I wanted to do, my goal was to cover my expenses with my side hustle income. But I didn't just, shoot out of college and go into entrepreneurship and become a millionaire. That wasn't my story. I did get in a traditional role. So I was in commercial real estate lending. So at 22, I only lasted in that job for 7 months, though, because at that time, the thing finally happened that I've been gunning towards this whole time. My side hustle income was now even with my expenses, a whole whopping $1,200 to $1,500 per month, because I was still living like a college kid. I was driving a crappy car. I was barely going out. I wasn't like buying new clothes or anything like that. I was sharing a room with someone. And so it was like $1,200 to $1,500 a month. And that's what I was making my side hustle. So I ended up taking the leap January 31st, 2019 at the age of 22 from corporate America. And I never looked back.
That's so cool. I mean, and the thing is that number is different for everybody, but you were just throwing things against the wall at that point. Like, I'm going to try everything, and one of these things is going to stick, like something's going to hit. And you did, you buckled down, you actually went into corporate America, got the job. And then you weren't like, well, now that I made it, I have this job, like, let's double my income first. I'm sure you were probably thinking like, the longer I let this go, the more comfortable I'm going to be in, and it's going to be harder and harder to pull that Band-Aid off. Right.
You wouldn't believe the pushback I got, and you probably would believe from friends and family. I got pushback from people in the FI community telling me that I was an idiot for quitting my job so early. They're like, you're only making $1,500 a month in your side hustles. You have this $80,000 a year corporate finance job. Like, what are you doing? Like, why don't you just grind it out for 5 to 7 years, hit FI the old fashioned way? And I'm like, no, like, screw you. I'm going to do it my way. But it was kind of crazy because like people that you'd think in this community, like people who go to the same types of events we go to, they were telling me I was an idiot too. So yeah, no, you're totally on point with that, Patrick.
Yeah, that's really weird, James.
So, you take us back to when you're 22, then you're just getting out of the job. What's the next step for you after that? Like, where's your life going in your entrepreneurial pursuits from that point?
So this could be a whole podcast in and of itself, but I ended up going on a book tour with this guy who's in this space, good friend of mine now, Grant Sabatier. He had just released his book, Financial Freedom, and I met him at a conference, FinCon 2018. Basically, long story short, we were like connecting a little bit, and he's like, hey, like, you want to manage my book tour? I'm like, sure. I don't know what that means, but I'd love to just work with you in any capacity, because this was a dude who had built up a massive online brand. He had retired at age 30 with like 1.25 million invested. And I'm like, I just want to learn from this guy, because at that point I had like barely anything invested, maybe 50K. And so I took on the gig. I'm like, sure, I'll organize your book tour. And then coming up to the date, he's like, do you want to go on the book tour with me? I'm like, yeah. So I quit the job January 31st, 2019. Like I said, went on this book tour around the country for 3 months from March to like end of May of 2019. We did 33 states, 16,000 miles. It was crazy. I learned so much from that. I mean, just the mindset that people that are that far ahead of you have, like, I feel like I was just shattering glass ceiling after glass ceiling that I had imposed on myself. So that was kind of the next step, but I was still doing all the same things that I was doing. I was still, podcasting, blogging. I was still doing some freelance work and selling digital products as well. And digital products after the book tour was over was kind of the next iteration. I started really doubling down because I was just so sick of trading my time for money.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So, all right, digital products. I'm sure everyone's thinking in their mind, like, what type of digital products are we talking about? Were you making like coloring books for parents to print out? Like what were you doing?
So that is an example of a digital product. And I know you're laughing, but there were silly things I sold. Like I opened an Etsy shop. I sold like printable games. I sold all these like cute little Valentine's Day things when Valentine's Day rolled around. I just opened an Etsy shop and sold what are called printables. So think like coloring pages is one, invitations, planners, games, like I mentioned, name cards, like place cards for weddings. There's so many different applications where, just look around whatever room you're listening to this in, whether you're at the gym or at home, there's probably something that's like a printable, something that you can create that can be printed out. So that's basically how it all started selling printables on Etsy. My first kind of big break was I was actually skiing with some FinConners, and I had like my phone in my pocket. It was on loud volume, and we were skiing, and so I was on the chairlift, and I kept hearing this cha-ching sound from my Etsy shop, and I'm like, "What the hell's going on?" I'm like, well, I had never really experienced this before because my Etsy shop was pretty much dead until this huge week happened. And so we go into the lodge. I'm talking to like Nick Loper, Side Hustle Nation, and he's like, "Yeah, well, like what's going on in your pocket? Like what is it like? What kind of app is that?" I'm like, "Oh, it's Etsy." And so I pulled my phone up, and I'd made like over $100 that day. It doesn't sound like a lot, or maybe it does if you're someone who's just new to side hustling. But over the course of that week, I'd made over $700. Didn't even open my laptop once. It was like the first real passive income that I ever experienced. I'd created these products back in January, listed them in my shop, and then all of a sudden, I make $700 in a week. So after that, I was like just super addicted to this notion of the kind of the Tim Ferris thing, putting in the work, the energy, the time up front, creating something that can be sold, and then selling that thing on autopilot over and over and over again. And that's why digital products, in my opinion, are so much better than like a physical product or trading your time for money, is you create it once and you could sell it to one person, you could sell it to 1,000 people. There's no additional overhead needed on your part.
Well,
There's
I
also
think
things
that's
like,
yeah, I was going to say I think that's where people can start to get creative with leveraging technology, and that's all any business is just creating systems and leverage. But going back to that shop, I'm really curious what did your systems look like for that Etsy shop to make it actually passive? Like, what did you have to do? What kind of system did you have in place to make this something that would just operate while you're on the slopes having fun?
so honestly, not much. I mean, for digital products on Etsy, Etsy does most of the heavy lifting. So once you create the product in whatever design program and then you list it on Etsy, all that happens is the customer buys it and just Etsy sends them the file. So I don't need to like go in and click send to customer or anything like that. The only time it's not passive is if the customer has a question, which is honestly maybe one or two people out of 100 sales. So it's like not 100% passive, nothing is, but it's like 99% passive. So honestly, though, James, there's not much needed to kind of pacify this side hustle.
That's really cool. So were you personally creating some of these printables and digital products inside of Canva, or were you, hiring this out on like a Fiverr type of thing? Kind of break that down for us a little bit.
Great question. Yeah. So I was actually creating them myself. And my first like 20 designs, if you guys saw them, you would just be laughing at me right now. They were horrible. I'm not a graphic designer. I can barely draw a stick figure, but I just kind of kept at it. I kept practicing in Canva because at that time I didn't have money. I didn't have resources to hire someone on Fiverr. I was like fresh out of college, barely had any savings, just trying to make things work. So yeah, I was doing all the work myself. As with anything, I got better. I kept iterating, kept changing things up. And then finally, like my designs were good enough where I started to make some sales. At this point, yes. So for those who are listening, they're like, well, I don't want to learn all that and do all that stuff. At this point, yes, I do have a designer, two designers actually that work for me, and I'll basically just guide them and direct them to make different products. But at the beginning, probably for the first 100 products that I listed, it was all me.
Patrick, do you remember like this was just a couple months ago, honestly, but Gary V's friends, like his little cartoon things that he would draw and sell. Do you remember seeing that in the market? This is what it
I
kind of
do.
reminds me of, just something simple like that. But it's honestly a low barrier to entry, and that's what you're describing. Like if Gary V can just sit down and draw cartoons out and sell them as NFTs and stuff, like anybody who's listening can go on Canva for $12 a month or whatever Canva costs and put together some sort of product that can be sold in this way. Or, as you learn to do at this point, have some designers working for you for $6 an hour, wherever they're located or whatever you pay them. There's a lot of ways to create leverage into these opportunities.
Definitely don't want people to think that they're going to have Gary V results. I'm pretty sure he did 100 million on that first NFT launch. You're not going to make $100 million probably with your Etsy side hustle, but it's a great way to make like a couple hundred or maybe even $1,000+ per month.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, well, if you can stack that, if you can stack that 400, let's say $100 a week onto your YouTube channel, onto your podcast, onto some other type of thing, then all of a sudden that's kind of how you become financially free, financially independent. So let's talk about that a little bit. You quit your job, you were making $1,500 a month doing these digital products. What does that look like now? Like, tell us about your business now and kind of all the different things that you're doing currently.
Yeah, well, there's definitely a couple of years to cover in between there, but I'll try to make it short and sweet, and then we can dive into wherever you guys are interested. But so I was basically just running my own shop, trying to grow that thing as fast as I possibly could. After a while, and I had done this because a friend, now business partner, Julie, had introduced me to the idea of printables. Like I had never been on Etsy before. I had never heard of printables or digital products, but she was a side hustler. She had a financial independence podcast, and she's like, hey, try this out. I'm like, okay, cool. And it worked out. But so after a while, a bunch of people like you guys were asking me, they're like, hey, like, what is this? I don't get what you're talking about. You're selling printables on Etsy and making thousands of dollars. Like, I don't really understand what it is. So Julie had back in the day, like formed a mastermind, and then that kind of translated into a course and a community. And now we have like a whole ecosystem helping digital product sellers. So like that's today. And that's where I spend most of my time is running that company with her. It's called Gold City Ventures. And it's become a behemoth. Now we have like over 10,000 students and people who are quitting their jobs. Some woman got featured last year for making 160K on the side on Etsy, which is just awesome and amazing to see. But yeah, that was definitely over the span of a couple of years. Also kind of sprinkled in there is as my income started to increase, because as you guys can imagine, once I quit that 9-to-5 job, all of a sudden I'm getting like 60+ hours back between the actual time I was working plus my commute. So now I'm pouring all that back into my side hustles. I stopped a lot of the freelance stuff. I was really focused on building digital products and my podcast and my blog at the time. So over the span of a couple of months, so I got back from the book tour in May. By the end of the year, I had almost replaced that income that I would have got from the corporate banking job. Like I almost ended up, I was just shy of 100K for total income for 2019. And I was still living crazy frugal, still driving that same beat up car, still sharing a room, still buying the cheapest groceries I could, still not going out too much and being really cheap when it came to travel. And so by the end of the year, I had some like extra capital to spend. And so the following year, 2020, I started investing in real estate. I was like maxing out all my retirement accounts, putting money in the stock market. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot in there. So we can definitely dive into real estate, the evolution of Gold City Ventures, my financial independence journey, whatever you guys want.
I love all of that stuff. I mean, yeah, that's kind of crazy to see that you quit your job and then by the end of the year had been able to make up that income, and then it just compounded and compounded and compounded and compounded. And that is really the power of going out and believing in yourself and making it happen. So I do kind of want to rewind some of that a little bit and kind of go into maybe that first kind of real estate thing. Like, what was that? Was that buying your own place? Was that buying an investment? And then kind of where the company started coming into play.
Yeah, so I guess I'll touch on real estate first. So, like I said, I had extra capital. I was maxing out my retirement accounts, but I have a financial independence podcast as well, the Fi Show, and there's been so many people on there who retired crazy early because of real estate. Like my now good friends, James and Emily, like retired at 27, 28, just started traveling the world because of real estate. I'm like, I should be able to figure this out. Like we've already had 50 guests who have figured this out and made a bunch of money, and like I can do this. So started searching the market for a primary residence. I was fully set on house hacking, and I was gonna buy like a duplex or triplex or quadplex, whatever I could find to do the whole 3.5% down and call it a day. But unfortunately, and unbeknownst to me, they did not like my entrepreneurial income very much. And by they, I mean the bank. So I ended up having to get a commercial loan. I kind of still did house hacking where I was living in the basement unit, renting out the two top units, but unfortunately had to go to the commercial loan route and put 25% down instead of the 3.5. So that was a little bit of a sticker shock when it came to the down payment. But yeah, got that property. A few months later, got my second property. A few months after that, got another property. I ended up acquiring 11 doors in one calendar year, which honestly, if I could go back in time, I probably wouldn't have done that. I probably would have taken it a little bit slower because it was just such a huge learning curve, and things went wrong. We ended up selling two of the properties. I mean, I'm just someone who likes to try new things, take new opportunities, and I'm like a lifelong learner. So even though like two of those things kind of failed, and we did end up making a little bit of money just because the market was crazy and the houses were appreciating, but yeah, it was a wild time just scooping
Well,
up properties left and right.
I was going to say, I think we've identified why the FI community was giving you a little bit of shit when you quit your job. It was to qualify for loans, man. I've never heard of somebody
Yeah.
doing their first house hack with a commercial loan. I think that's a first for me. But tell us a little bit about some of the deals that you got into. I'm curious to know like what products you're buying, like what price points, where are you buying these things? Are you buying in state? Are you buying out of state? Tell us a little bit more specifics about what you're acquiring.
Yeah, great question. So I'm in Massachusetts, and I honestly looked in Massachusetts for probably 3 or 4 months, and the price to rent ratios were just way out of whack. For those who are buying anywhere like east of Central Mass, it just doesn't make sense for a lot of properties. So one of my buddies who's a big investor around here, he's like, look in Connecticut and Rhode Island. I'm like, okay. So ended up jumping over the border, looking in Connecticut, putting offers in a couple of properties, losing out. We finally got one, and honestly, we kind of got lucky because that first property is probably our best performing property. We got it for 235K, and like I mentioned, we were living in the basement unit, and so a bit right above us is like a split level duplex, a 3 bed, 1 bath on each side, and one was renting for 1,050, the other one was 1,200. So we're bringing in 2,250 while we're living there, and all expenses like all in mortgage, taxes, insurance, landscape, like literally everything was about between 17 and $1,800 a month. So we were cash flowing while we were living there, which was awesome. This is with a commercial loan as well. And then we ended up moving out of that place like 4 months after that, actually. So and actually at the same time, one of the other tenants left. So that place went from 2,250 a month to I think 3,600 a month almost overnight, which was crazy. And the cash flow just went through the roof. And today that place rents for a total of 3,900 per month with the same like $1,800 all in expenses. So that property was our first property we acquired, and it was an absolute home run.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. That sounds kind of like one of my triplex that I got. So, and that was one of our first multifamily. So, I mean, to think that you have to be an experienced investor to, buy a freaking awesome deal, I think sometimes is not the case. Because I think when you're brand new, you're like really, really, really hounding for a good deal, and you pass up on things that you would buy as a more experienced investor, if that makes sense. James, do you kind of think the same way?
I agree. I mean, I think a lot of people psych themselves out. They overthink opportunities and deals. And I think an important thing to key in on here is with your deals, the cash flow and the rents increased over time. So, you can save a less than great deal or even a bad deal that you get into with time. As long as you can manage the expenses, rents generally tend to go up. Maybe that's not always the case in every market in all times, but over time that can heal some of those wounds from maybe getting into a deal that is, questionable.
Totally agree.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, all right, great. So you've got this house hack, but it's a commercial loan. So you move out in 4 months, you get another one. All of a sudden, you got 11 units in this first year. You're still doing everything else, right? You're still doing all of the printables and the online stuff, investing in the stock market. So what went wrong that you were like, man, I gotta cut one of these or two of these properties?
I think we were getting like cash flow trigger happy. So we were looking at places that cash flowed like crazy, but they just weren't in the best areas. They'd be in like a C-class neighborhood. And so we weren't getting the best tenants. So they'd always have issues. They were always complaining, even though they passed. Like I was pretty meticulous with our screening, and it was still like they were just kind of lower quality tenants. And so it was annoying. It was a nuisance. I'm like, I am making so much more money focusing in these other areas than these like really annoying tenants for, $800 or $1,000 a month in cash flow. It just wasn't worth it to me. And so, yeah, if I could go back in time, I'd definitely be like, Cody, slow down, dude. Like, you don't need 11 units in your first year ever of real estate. Just take it get one property a year, or however you want to do it. I didn't have the experience I thought I did, and it kind of nipped me in the butt. I mean, I didn't lose a bunch of money. It wasn't like my mortgage was underwater or anything like that. Ended up selling both for actually more than we bought the properties for, but it was just like way too much headache for not enough return. So we still have of those 11 units, we still have, was it 6 of the doors? Yeah, we have 6 of those 11 doors. We sold off 5 of those doors. We've since acquired a couple new doors since then, but much more slowly and much more meticulously.
So you keep saying did you buy all these deals with partners? What does the acquisition structure kind of look like for these 11 doors?
Yeah, so my fiance, we're going to marry this year actually, is my business partner in all of these. So we kind of handle everything together, from management to putting up the listings to outfitting them to managing repairs, all that stuff. So yeah, that's what I'm talking about when I say we.
Business partner, life partner. I like it.
That's it. It makes things a lot easier when there's 2 of you.
It sure does. It sure does. That's what me and Danielle have done over these last, 5 years together. And when you have a significant other that at least supports you, understands, gets what you're doing, it helps the burden. That's for sure. So during this time, like, how has the online, printables, digital products kind of scaled up? Like around this time, you were making $1,500 a month. Now all of a sudden you're $100,000 a year. Now all of a sudden you're able to acquire 4 properties, putting 25% down, all with income coming from this, side hustle digital products business. So what did that turn into? What did that look like around that time?
So 2020, we had actually, so me and that business partner, Julie, I talked about, we had all these grand ideas. We actually launched 3 courses simultaneously in 2019, which if anyone is thinking of launching a course, don't do 3. It was the worst idea ever. I was literally had like some sleepless nights. I didn't hang out with my friends for like a month or 2 because I was literally working 18-hour days trying to get these things together. It was like hundreds of hours of content, thousands of dollars in editing, and like all this stuff. And 2 of them we don't even run to this day. So we actually ended up shutting 2 of them down, a blogging course and a freelancing course. But the course that like really, really hit was the digital products, the Etsy printables course. And that kind of just became a whole beast of its own. Like other people started joining us and they were having success, and, success spreads. People talk when they start making sales like, hey, I just like took this course with Cody and Julie, Gold City Ventures, and I just made, my first $1,000 in a month. And then other people, and it just exploded. So all of a sudden it was like this beast that couldn't be tamed. And we had to start hiring people on. We had to hire like paid coaches to answer questions in our Facebook group. We had to hire admin help. We had to hire all these different people. It just really blew up way faster than we could have possibly imagined. So yeah, that was definitely a big catalyst for like the income jump in 2019 and 2020 and beyond. But at the same time, I was able to grow my other stuff that I was doing too. So like I mentioned, I was still podcasting, I was still blogging, and pouring a lot more time into those side hustles. So yeah, my monthly income that first year, like 2019, went from like 1,500 to I think it was like almost 10 grand, or maybe a little bit more than 10 grand for those last 6 months of the year.
I like that you admit that 2 of your courses flopped.
Yeah.
Why, man? What happened to those 2 courses? How are they different from the one that was successful? Like, give us a little bit of compare and contrast. Like, if you had to reflect on that, why was the one with the Etsy course successful and why were the other two not?
So have you heard the saying, James, the riches are in the niches?
Riches and niches. Yeah, of course.
Yes, of course. So that was it exactly. I think, and a lot of people fall into this trap, myself included. We just had like a general blogging course and a general freelancing course. Now, if we maybe like really funneled in on one specific aspect of blogging or one specific freelance activity, those courses probably would have done a lot better. But people get overwhelmed. And so when someone was going and looking at one of those courses, they're like, okay, this is a course on freelancing. And then, they're looking around, they're like, now what? Because there's so many possibilities that are under that umbrella. So I think honestly that was the big problem, is we were just not niched down whatsoever. They were super general, super broad. And so the person coming into our ecosystem just then they felt overwhelmed. They didn't know what to do. So those courses just did not perform as well. Great question.
Well,
that's a good insight.
coming to a computer near you is Patrick's off-market seller finance multifamily investment course program.
There you go. Exactly. Instead of just like the real estate investing course. Because if you're just like trying to compete in the real estate investing space and you just create like a real estate investing course, you are going to get crushed by all of the huge guys out there with millions of followers and huge email lists. But if you have some super niche specific thing, like I actually just spoke recently with a dude who just focuses on Airbnb arbitrage or like Airbnb subleasing. That's all he talks about. And he has a multi-7-figure business because he just knows his niche. People know exactly what they're getting when they come to learn from him. So yeah, people are like scared to niche down because they're like, well, I don't want to exclude all these other ways to do it. I don't want to exclude all these other people, but I promise you there are plenty of people in that niche that you're looking at.
Yeah, we actually had someone on the podcast who does midterm nurse rentals, and she started a course and did 150 grand in 3 days, all
Yep.
because it's like this very, very specific niche that she was able to do. So I think that's freaking awesome. All right, so I'm just thinking here because my mind gets blown sometimes when we start talking about these digital products. So you launch this course and it kind of blows up, and in the course blowing up, now all of a sudden you are blowing up. So the podcast, the blog, all of this other stuff is starting to get traction by all of these people that you now have an authority or an authority figure in, an expert in all of these other things. So how did this kind of like compound, and what were you selling this course for?
So in terms of the compound question, actually it was kind of different audiences. The people who were following me for the financial independence stuff tend to not overlap too much with the course people. So just to be honest, like on Etsy, it's like 90+% women. So a lot of people who end up purchasing our course and selling digital products, it's probably the same demographic. It's like 90% women. For my like FI audience, for people who follow me for early retirement and investing and all that stuff, that's almost like 60-40 men. So it actually isn't as big of a crossover as you might think, Patrick. It definitely did help in terms of like notoriety. Like I was able to be featured in big publications, which then just kind of makes my public brand just lift a little bit more every time I get featured in like a Yahoo Finance, Business Insider, Forbes, whatever. But those actually didn't coincide as much as you might think. And then to answer the second part of your question, which was about the course growth itself, right?
Yeah, like, how much were you selling this course for, just for people in their kind of mind, that because then that shows kind of how much revenue you're bringing in to be able to all of a sudden hire out a team of X number of people to control this thing.
Yeah, so the course itself is $197. We also have like a membership that's separate slash attached to the course. That's $30 a month. But then we have like a whole suite of digital products actually under the Gold City Ventures umbrella. So it's not me, it's not Julie. Like we have all these templates that we sell people so they can create a digital product in like 5 minutes. And so as the business matured, we just started adding on all of these additional revenue streams like under Gold City Ventures. We started doing affiliate marketing. We've done some sponsorship stuff. We actually ended up launching some other courses, doing some joint ventures, helping other people launch their courses. Like it just became a whole thing. And now at this point, we have probably like 10 or 15 income streams just under the Gold City Ventures umbrella. So it's not just straight course sales. So when I'm talking about these numbers, I don't want people to think like, wow, they must have sold so many courses. A lot of it, or some of it, comes from these ancillary products as well.
Yeah, and then what's really nice is that you're you're also expanding already on someone that has purchased from you, knows you, likes you, trusts you, and appreciates the product that you have. So, it just kind of trickles down, so
Yeah.
you're extracting more dollars out of that same person, with the products that you have. So that's all great. So let's fast forward to today and talk about, kind of this company. What does it look like now? How many employees do you have? What's that revenue look like underneath with all those different products that you've been able to build?
So today, I think, including like contractors and everyone we have working for us, we have 13 people working for us. We have a team of template designers. We have someone managing social media. We have two people helping with email, like admin assistants. We have people helping with copywriting. We have someone who does like our web and tech stuff. We have a bunch of paid experts in our Facebook group. We have someone who runs our lives for us. We have someone who hosts our podcast. So like I said, it's just like slowly, like it's not like all that happened the day after we started making money, but over time it's just like slowly compounded. And like I said, now we have this whole massive community of sellers who are just crushing it. And the more that they succeed, the more that new students succeed, the more that people hear about us, because of course someone's going to want to try this side hustle if they read an article about someone who just made $160,000 last year doing it. So it's honestly done a lot of the marketing for itself, and that's how we were able to scale and grow to 13 employees, I guess, pretty quickly over the course of like 3 years. It's pretty fast, and it's continuing to grow and change, and we're constantly learning and trying new things. The newest thing for us is like social media. Like I said, we just hired a social media manager. We have people like editing clips for us, creating content, and so that's kind of the big new challenge. We're never slowing down, never stopping. If people have noticed a theme, like I'm always someone who doesn't back down from a challenge, and even if I fail and fall flat on my face, like I know that I'm just going to be better for the next thing.
Well, with regard to those employees, are all of them stateside, or do you have some that are virtual working in other countries?
Yeah, we have some from the Philippines. I think we have 4 working in the Philippines, and the other 9 are stateside.
Okay.
That's great. That's great. And so with the business that you're at now, with your 13 employees based out of contractors and all this other stuff, like where do you see, like where do you want to take this? Like you have this company with all these other courses, all these other products. Like what's your vision for this company?
I mean, right now we're just continuing to double down on keeping the course content up to date, as good as it can possibly be, focusing a lot on marketing. So like I mentioned, we're doing a lot more organic. We're doing the social media. We're building out our YouTube channel. We hired someone who's good at SEO to help manage our blog. So right now it's just like continuing to double down on what's working. And the reason I'm so passionate, and we've been talking about digital products a lot, is just like you said, James, I think you said it. It's such a low barrier to entry thing. It's like, I love this quote actually, that digital products don't have mortgages. So like real estate is a great passive income vehicle, or mostly passive income vehicle, once you have your system set up. Same with digital products, except digital products, you're not going into $200,000 or plus of debt to get this thing started. You're not going to make as much money right off the bat, but it's just like a great way to get your feet wet and kind of understand how this passive income thing works, and just the notion of, putting the time, energy, money into something and then reaping the benefits afterwards. So I think honestly, Patrick, the goal is just to continue to kind of spread the message, grow the company, get our systems and processes operating as smoothly as and efficiently as possible. And yeah, I'm just excited for the next chapter.
Do you have any sort of like revenue goal or anything like that that you're trying to hit? Like, do you have any kind of metrics, trying to get a certain amount of customers or a certain number of sales?
We would love to get to an 8-figure business, which that's our big, hairy, audacious goal. We're on our way there, but I think we're gonna probably have to add on like different courses or different product suites, or just expand our footprint a little bit, because at where we're currently at right now, we might be a little too niche down to hit that revenue goal. But that's the big goal for us.
I love the goals where I have to sit there and count like how many commas, how many
That's
zeros are in place there.
that's over 10 million, James. That's over 10 million a year is
Hey,
what that
Patrick,
is.
I haven't had the opportunity to sit down, pull out that much money from my bank account and count it. So like I'm still getting used to those big numbers.
Me
I
either.
know. I'm like, all right, 6 figures, 7 figures, all right, 8 figures. Let's go. I mean, that's huge for someone who was super excited for $1,500 a month and quit their almost 100K a year job to be talking about, 3 or 4 years later. So that's fantastic. So let's, for everyone out there that's listening and like, oh my God, up a 7-figure business in a couple years, like that's crazy. So what's the average person that buys the course, that's doing everything that they need to be doing to start creating these digital products? Like, what would you say the average person out there has the potential to make, realistically, reliably, doing these digital products?
So, I mean, we do position this as a side hustle course. Most people do it as a side hustle. Usually their parents who just want to make some extra money. They might have some downtime and they might be spending 5 or 10 hours during the week on this stuff. I'd say an average for people who are actually putting in the work, going to caveat that because there's so many people, it's like gym memberships. People will sign up for a course and then they'll learn a bunch of stuff and then they won't do anything. It's kind of like, I think Planet Fitness has like a 10% attendance rate of all the members that have signed up. So it's kind of like
guilty there. I'll be honest.
So want to caveat that because if I'm including those other 90% the average, it really skews it down. But for the people who put in the work and, probably average 5 to 10 hours a week, I would say high hundreds, low thousands within the first year. And then you could continue to scale and iterate. So it wouldn't be outlandish for someone to start averaging 7, 8, 9, $1,200, $1,500 a month, and then continue to grow and iterate. Like some of those best students that I mentioned before, we have a few that are like consistently over the 6-figure mark now on Etsy. But during their first year, they were maybe averaging like $500 or $600 a month. And then the cool thing, like I said, with digital products, once you get one that hits, now it's like a mini passive income stream. So if you have someone buying a $10 digital product 10 times every single month, now you're making $100 from that digital product every month. If you can find 10 of those products, now you have 1,000. If you have 20 of those products, now it's 2,000. And it's not like you have to resell, remarket. Like as long as it's like an evergreen type product, you just built yourself like a nice little passive income cash flow machine.
And I just want to kind of emphasize what Cody you
and for
said.
Listeners out there, go ahead.
What? Okay. I just want to emphasize what you said a little bit earlier is, you failed a lot too. You went through these processes to start 2 courses that didn't end up working out. And even with the one that did work, you're recognizing all these things that you can improve upon, reiterate, and make better. So, it's just, going to what you've said, and everybody says all the time, it's a commitment thing. And once you put the time towards it and are willing to fail and move forward and learn, that's where you're really going to start to see the benefits.
Totally agree. Yeah, you got to be willing to fail. I think that's the biggest mistake a lot of entrepreneurs make is they think their first thing is going to be a smash success. Like my first 3 businesses failed. I didn't even talk about them on this podcast, but my first 3 businesses failed when I was 19 in college after I read The 4-Hour Workweek. And it sucked at the time. And I was like, man, I'm an idiot. Like, why did these businesses work? But now, like, I learned so many skills from those failed businesses. Like, you learn how to market, you learn copywriting, you learn how to network, you learn how to talk to people, you learn some basic accounting and finance. It's like your skills just start to compound whether you win or you fail just from trying new things. So that's kind of the mindset I've adopted is like, doesn't matter if I fail, doesn't matter if I succeed. It's way more fun when I succeed, but either way, like I'm becoming a more valuable asset in the like, quote unquote workplace.
Yeah, and I think you learn more from those failures sometimes, or those successes you didn't know you had. Down the road, once you're reflecting a little bit with all that mental toughness.
Yeah.
I think mental toughness is a big thing too, because even so, just think about the toughness you have to have when something does start to blow up. And now all of a sudden you go from digital creator to now manager to now business owner to now all of these other things. Now, before you were just trying to figure out how to create these cool products. And then now all of a sudden you're managing people and managing a big, multi-million-dollar business. And that becomes a big type of thing too. So I think a lot of the times those failures kind of mentally prepare you for those big successes, because there's problems that come along with that too, So I think that's really cool. I kind of wanted to ask, so what's really motivating you now? Like you've got the success, quote unquote, financial freedom, you got some real estate, you got this company you're building, you sound passionate about it, the podcast and everything. Like what's motivating you now to like just keep pushing through and, not buy that dream Lambo and, drive off into the sunset?
I think it's interesting that I wasn't even going to talk about this until you mentioned Lambo, but I think just having the ability to buy things is kind of what everybody wants. That's not actually buying the thing. Like I could afford to buy a couple Lambos and a mansion, and it wouldn't materially change my financial situation that much. But I don't think that would bring me any happiness whatsoever. Like I get all my happiness from travel, from hanging out with people that I genuinely value. It's like all the intangibles that people don't talk about. Like I don't know. I just think I hate the flashy richness that you see on like TikTok and Instagram and all these people. Oh, I make 100K a month, and they're like standing next to a private jet or some crazy car. But what motivates me, honestly, at this point, it's like it's kind of a game, like the game of business. I've just kind of fell in love with the whole process of it. Like not the management so much, actually. That's something I'm currently working on because I know you mentioned, Patrick. It's like it is a big transition going from just like a side hustle guy to now managing a team. But just like the marketing, the strategy, the delivering the content, like how can we make this better? How can we change this funnel? Like there's just I've like fell in love with business. So that's definitely one of my big motivators. The other one is just seeing other people succeed, because all the way up until I hit financial independence, and I'm sure you guys can concur, all of my decisions were based around money. It was like, I am going to do or not do X, Y, and Z because of the amount it costs. Like, I'm not going to go on this trip because of money, or like, I'm going to, buy these items in the grocery store because it's cheaper than these items. Now that money isn't as much of a concern anymore, it's like now I kind of am basing my days, my schedule, my weeks around what lights me up, what makes me happy. Because I know a lot of people talk about kind of the conundrum of FI is like, if you quit and you have nothing to quit to, it's like, what's the point anyway? You're just gonna be really upset and miserable. You gotta find that purpose. So for me, it's really started to light me up, like, creating content on social media and helping other people start their financial independence journeys, and kind of being that guiding light, holding the torch up ahead of them and showing them what's possible. Because I didn't know that this was possible at my age when I was 19. I didn't have anyone who was, right now I'm 27. The people that I was meeting were older than I was. And if I didn't just like kind of jump head first and try all the things I did, I don't think I ever would have known that it was possible at like 24, 25 when I was able to hit FI.
So I'm kind of curious, at what point did your fiance come into the picture? Was she with you when you were doing the ramen, baked beans, and hot dog part of your life, or did she come in a little bit later?
Oh yeah, no, she's ride or die. She was with me since I was 19 when I first discovered the 4-hour work week, and when I discovered Mr. Money Mustache. Like we we went on a trip actually to Australia. It's funny, we spent $9,000 in 5 months. That was the entire cost of the trip.
Yeah,
We were driving around, we weren't getting hotels, we were sleeping in the car, eating canned tuna, and now we're still together today with all the material success that we've had. It's kind of crazy.
that's awesome. Yeah, I know my my wife and I made a trip out to Europe for about $1,000 a piece, airfare, hotel included. So like, there's really affordable travel options out there. But
For sure.
speaking about that, like, when you started to get into the journey, what was it like? Trying to bring somebody else along with you. Was she of the same mindset, or did she, require a little bit of convincing to live this, somewhat alternative, crazy, frugal lifestyle?
I think we had an advantage in that we were really young when we figured this out. Like she's 2 years younger. So I was 19, she was 17. I'm sure you guys remember when you're 19 and 17, your standard of living is not very high. So it's not like going into a relationship when you're 40 and maybe someone has like a nicer car already and they're kind of used to some level of lifestyle inflation. There was none of that. We were totally fine, like sleeping on the floor, sleeping on a couch, eating whatever we had to. So quite honestly, I think it was kind of a blessing in disguise that we were able to discover this so early, because we didn't hit any of those like, oh, like I really want this car, or I really want to go on this vacation. And I'm like, no, like we can't do that because we have to save for financial independence. It was like we were just both side by side in the journey together.
I think that's really important. Um, everything you said right there, because I'm kind of in that same spot, where my wife and I, Danielle, we've been together. We just hit 15 years yesterday. I'm 35, and it's kind of crazy to be going through this whole journey together and putting in that hard work, and having somebody that you're building this along with that's on your level. Because like you said, you're there when we were just talking about it yesterday, like when we got our first apartment and I lost my job the month we moved in. Like,
Oh
you
man.
know what I mean? Like, and now, after building up this, what we've been able to accomplish now, where if something, I don't even have a job anymore. Like I just do this. So it's kind of crazy when you put that work in, it can actually happen at a young age. You're 27, I'm 35. James is, I think, 30, so 31. And we're all kind of there, right? I mean, so I think that's really super cool. And I love what motivates you now is not the money, because it's so true. The money is such a motivating factor when you're worried about it all the time. And then as soon as you don't have to worry about it anymore, you're like, all right, cool. Now it's really the passionate stuff that comes out, and makes the most sense.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. It's definitely been a shift for me because, like I said, I mean, even before I discovered Fi, and you guys probably were in the same boat, like everything that I did was dictated by money. Like if we wanted to go do something or not go do something, my parents were looking how much it costs. And then as I started earning my own money, I'm like, I can get this pair of shoes, not this pair of shoes because of the money. Now it's like, I like this pair of shoes, I'm going to buy them. It's a very different mindset. And I think, like you said, it's also important to kind of really figure out what you do value. Because I think a lot of people are lost, whether it's themselves or in a relationship. Like something me and my fiance Lauren did was like we wrote down independently of one another like the top 10 things that we value and that we like to do, and like the top 8 or the almost the exact same thing, and we were in different rooms writing them down. And so that was like just kind of a really good thing to know and start the conversation of like, okay, let's like take a picture of this, let's frame this, let's know that these are the things we value, so that when we start making a ton of money, like we're not going to get skewed. Like you, unfortunately, a lot of people, they'll set the goalpost, go past the goalpost, and it just continues to move and move and move. And they might have all like the initial thing that they wanted was that first goalpost, but it's just never enough. People are never satisfied. So kind of regrounding yourself and knowing why you started this whole journey in the first place, however you want to do that. For us, it was like writing down that value list. That was really, really helpful.
Looking at where your life and where your business is now, though, I mean, you're looking to scale up to an 8-figure business. You're probably, I imagine, looking to accumulate a couple more assets and grow your wealth in some ways. What kind of obstacles do you feel like you are facing between now and then, whether it's the 8-figure business or improving your financial independence situation?
I think it's honestly the regrounding that I was just talking about. Like sometimes I'll get so pulled into the work that I'm like, hold on, like Lauren just asked me something. I wasn't listening because I'm so focused on what I'm doing, or like I'm skipping this dinner, or I'm, skipping going for a walk because I'm working on something. I'm like, I don't need the money. Like, yes, the mission is really important, but I think my close relationships are a lot more important than that. So I am like constantly making sure that I'm like really level set, because it is, even if I don't need the money, it is addicting to see those figures going up, but I don't want those figures to go up at the expense of any of my relationships or anything like that. So honestly, that's probably been one of the biggest struggles is like, yeah, I know that I could work 16-hour days and get to that 8-figure mark a lot faster, but do I want to do that? Do I want to sacrifice the quality of life, my friendships, my relationship? No, I don't. And so it's the regrounding and just like, why did I start this in the first place? And what do I really want my life and my days to look like? That's something that like over the past year or so, since my income has so drastically increased, that I've been like making sure that I'm constantly looking back and regrounding myself.
That I have to say is huge. And I want to ask, over these last few years and building this success, have you lost any relationships? Have you lost any friendships that you had, throughout this journey, whether it was on purpose or just because you kind of grew out of touch with where you were at? Like, I'm interested to see if you've been able to kind of hold that all together, and maybe not necessarily in your part, but just other people's perception of you.
That's a good question. I would say that there's not like more of a fallout because I went on this route than if I didn't. Like, of course, I mean, you guys have probably just lost friends just because you get out of touch. Maybe they move away. Maybe you just don't talk to them anymore. But because of like the Phi path specifically, I really am fortunate that a lot of my friends have just they've been my friends for over a decade now. I have some friends that I've been friends with for 22 years since kindergarten. I still hang out with some of these kids, which is amazing. One thing that has changed, and this isn't with my close friends, but like kind of acquaintances, they'll know me, they'll see me on like, Facebook post featured in something with like my income numbers or something. They'll be like, oh, like Cody, the rich guy. And they'll like expect me to like pay for dinner or pay for something like that. And again, it doesn't really happen with my close friends, but I definitely have gotten that. And especially like from friends' parents, they'll just make like snarky comments, like almost like must be nice type of things. But from my core group of friends, I got to say, Patrick, I've got a pretty solid crew, and they've rode with me the whole time.
Same here, man. Same here. And I have to say, I hate that phrase. The must be nices are the absolute worst because
Yeah.
you don't focus on any of all of the hard work we just talked about for the last hour of putting in all this solid thing. And it's like, must be nice. But with that being said, this is a perfect segue into our last segment of the show that James and I like to call the Big Four. James, take it away.
I don't know if I'm on a lag, so hopefully this timing's working out. All right, so Cody, I want you to tell us something that through your life has felt like a financial independence cheat code, something that really helped you achieve financial independence. Maybe something that's a little unknown or kind of like a secret that people just wouldn't pick up because it's not obvious.
I wanted to say digital products, but we really exhausted that one in this podcast. Something that I've learned in the past couple of years. So I'm getting really into the weeds here, but maybe you have some nerdy listeners that'll like it. I've been maxing out my solo 401k for the past couple of years. And what's really interesting is I have a self-directed solo 401k. So I can buy real estate within that solo 401k. I can do angel investing. Like I just invested $50,000 into a startup last year within my solo 401k. So if that startup ends up becoming Google and it becomes $1 billion, I owe zero taxes. So that's kind of a crazy hack that I discovered and that I've been utilizing the past couple of years. So hopefully you have some super nerdy listeners who are into maxing out their self-directed solo 401ks in this audience.
I'm a big fan of that strategy, the Peter Thiel strategy.
Exactly.
Super risky shit in your tax protected retirement accounts. Like, when you, and I think it also goes back to the scarcity mindset. When you get rid of that, you can kind of see like those tax protected accounts as being like really great vehicles for making risky investments. Maybe not buying like your index funds. Like that's great to do generally. But like if you're going to make a bet, do it on something where you don't have to pay taxes. So personal opinion. Make wise financial decisions, of course.
Exactly. I love the self-directed solo 401k. First time on the show, someone's mentioned that one. So great,
Cool.
great answer. All right, I think you're gonna have some good ones for this. So we call this one our resources. So are there any specific books, podcasts, or people that have shaped your overall financial independence journey? It doesn't have to be real estate related, or it could be motivation, it could be anything that's really shaped your thought process, your thinking that you think our listeners would benefit from.
I've already mentioned two, but I'll just say them again. Definitely 4 Hour Work Week, that book, and Tim Ferris, I guess, as a person. And Mr. Money Mustache has been pretty influential, just all of his stuff in those early days. Mad Scientist was huge at the beginning. Recently, I've been listening to a lot more like marketing and sales and business building people. Alex Hormozy is someone who I love his podcast, The Game, and he just has great social media channels. Let's see, are there any other people, podcast, books? Another book that's really good. We kind of talked about this today, like taking action and kind of not knowing the consequence of that action and just rolling with it. It's called Ready, Fire, Aim. So if you haven't checked that book out, definitely check that one out. I like Amy Porterfield's podcast a lot, Online Marketing Made Easy, just because it pertains to me. I'm definitely missing people on here. Oh, Grant Sabatier, the guy I went on the book tour with. I mean, he was just such a huge influential person. And also my business partner, Julie. And if we're shouting out other people, I got to give a shout out to my mom and my fiance, Lauren. So yeah. Yeah.
Keep them going.
I love it. That's great, man. That's awesome. All great ones, and book that we haven't had anyone list. I know James talked about it before, but no one's listed it as their answer. So all great stuff. If you're listening, go out there. And by the time this podcast comes out, you'll be able to click the link in our bio and go buy any one of these books on our Amazon shopping. So that is not set up as we're recording this, but by the time this comes out, we've been talking about it more than enough. So click our affiliate link down below. Go get ready, aim, fire. James.
All right, Cody, it's 5 years in the future, man. What does your life look like? Business-wise, personal-wise, paint a picture for us.
I think it's going to look eerily similar to what I'm doing today. Maybe some of those revenue figures will be up, but I have built what I'd like to think like a pretty decent work-life balance. Like last year we traveled, which we value a lot. like I mentioned on that sheet. It was like toward the top of the sheet of the 10 things. We traveled for like more than like between 3 and 4 months out of the year. I think it was like between 90 and 120 days we're out of the house traveling, which we love to do. And I do like working on my businesses. So it's definitely going to be, I'm not going to be completely stopped working in 5 years. I genuinely enjoy business and working and creating things. Yeah, I think it's going to look pretty similar to what I'm doing now, maybe just on a bigger scale, hopefully. I think actually one thing that I'll mention, because going back to what I mentioned before, like some people kind of have that, they hit FI, they don't know what to do with themselves. Something that I tried to do really intentionally as I was like kind of building toward the journey of FI was to add those things into my day as I started to get more financial freedom. And I think not enough people do this. They'll be like, once I hit FI, I'm going to start going to the gym. I'm going to learn the guitar. I'm going to learn Spanish. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. But like you can easily start to sprinkle that stuff in as you start to gain more financial freedom, as your nest egg gets bigger, as you get more properties, as you start selling more digital products. So for those who are like, I don't know how to start building toward that dream life, like just take the freedom you have now. If you're 75% of the way to FI, maybe ask your boss, if you still have a boss, to move down to a 4-hour work week, or sorry, a 4-day work week. Tim Ferris is in my head. A 4-day work week. Take Fridays off. Start to, hit the gym hard on Fridays and do the hiking that you've been talking about for the past 15 years. Like, I think a lot of people it's like once this, then that. But I think people should start building that dream life now in bits and pieces. And then once they hit FI, then it can be like the full picture.
Life is meant to be lived. People shouldn't take that for granted. Like that's why we're doing all this to begin with. So, don't completely forsake it for living life. And, you just never know what happens. So make use of the time that you have today for sure. Please, don't do it all just for the money.
Mm.
Exactly. And for the win, one of the best tips of the whole podcast right there, snuck in right at the end. So for those people that are still listening, that want to connect with you, they want to, say you inspired them, they love the book, they love the tips, where's the best way for them to find, connect, listen to that podcast, check out the website, drop it all?
Yeah, if you love listening to podcasts, you'll probably enjoy our podcast where we interview people on their journeys to financial independence. People have already hit FI all different ways, very similar to this one. So we probably have a pretty decent crossover audience. It's the Financial Independence Show. Search in any podcast app. I know we talked a ton about digital products and Gold City Ventures today. If you guys want just like a quick taste test of like, is this right for me? Do I want to do this? We have a free hour-long workshop. It's goldcityventures.com/workshop. And you can go check it out. It's myself and my business partner, Julie, just teaching you all about digital products and the opportunities and how to get started and just basically the general basics.
I love it. I love it. I love it. All right, now go give them a follow. Now, you guys know the drill. This podcast is free, but it's not really free. All we ask is that you drop a comment below. Make sure that, God damn it, these dogs, we're leaving this shit in. So make sure to drop a comment below. Make sure to hit that like button for the dogs barking in the background. Make sure you're following us on social media, all that good stuff. And we'll catch you next time.
See you guys. We'll leave this in too. It's funny, Patrick, because nobody could hear the dogs on our end.
But
no. Yeah, we couldn't.
That's amazing.
So you just have to like, that's cool. All right.
Dude, they were so loud, dude. Like, I think the Amazon guy